You're listening to the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Now here's your host, Fran Duffy.
That's right, another week, and we are back for a short week here as the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, continues. I'm Fran Duffy, and I think we've got a great show for you here on episode number 209. At the top of this week's show, we've got Chalk Talk, where I catch up with my friend Greg Cosell from NFL Films to talk about what we saw from the Eagles' loss to the Detroit Lions in Week 3, Sunday at Lincoln Financial Field. Greg and I have both poured through the tape. We'll talk about what we saw on both sides of the ball before transitioning to a quick turnaround. We've got a game on Thursday night. Eagles traveling to Lambeau Field to take on the Green Bay Packers. We'll dive into that matchup on both sides of the ball, see what the strengths and weaknesses are of this Green Bay team that is undefeated so far this season. Very interesting matchup indeed. After that, we will jump into my scouting report where I'm going to break down, honestly, one of the most impressive players I've watched across the league this year, and that is Green Bay Packers corner Jaire Alexander, second-year player out of Louisville. We will talk about how I viewed him coming out of college and why I thought he would transition well to the NFL. But let's get things started here. Chalk Talk with my buddy Greg Cosell. We're going to talk about Lions here. Let's get it going here in Chalk Talk.
Let's get down to business. It's time for Chalk Talk.
Happy to welcome in back to the show here on Chalk Talk, my friend Greg Cosell from NFL Films. Greg, welcome back here to the NovaCare Complex.
Fran,
week 4.
It is week 4.
It is week 4.
It is.
It's a short week. A little bit of a crazy schedule here this week. But I want to start this off basically with the way, because I don't even want to try and make it up on the fly. I'm just going to go with how I started my article today, recapping the Eagles game. And you tell me if I'm crazy. It's tough to win in the NFL. It's tough to win when you lose the turnover battle. It's tough to win when you drop 7 passes. It's tough to win when you allow a special teams touchdown. It's tough to win when you have a handful of crucial penalties, including 3 offensive PIs, a block in the back on a blocked kick, and a neutral zone infraction on third down on the goal line that gives the opposing team a touchdown instead of a field goal. When you have to overcome all of that, it's very tough to win, and the Eagles still somehow did it the other day at Lincoln Financial Field with no Alshon Jeffrey, no Deshaun Jackson. You had guys leaving the game: Jason Peters, Derek Barnett, Ronald Darby left midway through. They had Andre Dillard stepped in for Jason Peters, and then he left. It was a crazy game, full of highs and lows. And unfortunately, just as Doug Peterson said today, you want your playmakers to be able to make plays, and unfortunately, they just couldn't make enough on Sunday.
Well, and the other issue there, it's tough to win when you're playing with backups.
That's what I mean.
And granted, it's a next man up league. We all understand that. Every team understands that. Doug Peterson and any coach will not say that we lost because we're playing with backups.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, that makes it even more difficult to win.
Yeah.
So it was a tough deal. Obviously, 7 drop passes were absolutely critical.
Yep.
And the thing about drop passes is they never come in good situations.
Correct.
So, and the special teams touchdown, I really thought was a killer because, if I'm not mistaken, they just went ahead 10-7, right?
They went, no, that was the opening kick for Detroit. The Eagles got the ball. They went up 3-0.
3-0, right.
They went up 3-0, and then they kicked it off, and they took it to the house.
And then it was 7th, right. And they actually had a good drive, even though they ended with a field goal.
It did. It was a good drive.
So it was one of those games where, look, here's the bottom line. When you're playing, unless the other team's going to make a lot of mistakes, when you're playing with backup players, you have to play as relatively close to a perfect game as you can, percentage-wise. I mean, are there examples where you can still turn it over and win? Of course there are. Nothing's an absolute.
Yep.
But percentage-wise, when you're playing with backup players, you have to play as clean a game as you possibly can.
Right.
And obviously that did not happen.
Yeah, I mean, if you take away any of those facets that we brought up, you take away the block in the back penalty, you take away any of those turnovers, you take away the kick return for a touchdown, potentially a different game. I mean,
right.
It's easy to say that when you look at the final score,
sure,
but it's potentially a different game.
And teams that lose can always say that, but I must admit, watching it live, when they blocked the kick, before I knew there was a block in the back penalty, I really thought, they're going to win this game, because they had gotten down to about the 20-yard line. They were at least in field goal range right there.
Yep, no question.
So, hey, but that's unfortunately the way it turned out.
Well, let's talk about something we talked about last week, which was that to beat the Detroit Lions, you had to be able to beat man coverage. And while the completions weren't always there. I thought schematically they did a lot of really good things to beat man coverage in this game. You saw the mesh concept a couple of times. The one was certainly a touchdown to Nelson Aguilar.
Sure.
You saw Dagger a number of times.
A lot of times.
They
run it every week.
They do, but this one there was 10, 11, 12 times it felt like. But we saw pick plays. You saw some misdirection. You saw running backs out of the backfield. You saw a lot of different things to beat man coverage. I thought that was good going into this game.
No, they did a good job tactically. Obviously, those drops were killer, and even the way the game played out, the Goddard one was, and it's strange because Goddard just has such good hands.
I've seen him make that play in camp 9 times out of 10.
I'd say 10 out of 10.
Yeah,
Even watching his college tape, going back to college, he just didn't drop the ball. Now, again, if he catches that, there's no guarantee they win the game.
Because they did score a touchdown on that drive.
Right, but 2 minutes went by, and those were a crucial 2 minutes.
Yep.
So... they did some good things offensively, given that they were playing with the weapons that they were. And then I think another thing too is, I thought Carson played pretty well, but I thought there were a couple of throws that I'm sure he'd like to have back. And one of them to me was the all-go 8-seam to Sanders, where he threw it just a little bit behind him. It was still a completion for 30-plus yards. But I think if he really lays it out, and who knows, Sanders is probably not used to catching balls like that.
Over the shoulder.
So we don't know if he just catches it in stride as a wide receiver does. So we don't know the answer to that.
Yep.
But it had the look of a play that could have been a touchdown.
Yeah, it was. I've been waiting for them to run that play because it's been a favorite of mine for the last couple of years. All right, well let's talk. You bring up the play to Sanders. Was used in a lot of different ways in this game. We saw him on a couple of routes out of the backfield, vertically down the field on that same drive as that seam route. He ran a corner route to the pylon where Carson just overthrew it. It's tough to say. The timing was certainly off.
You mean the one where he was under pressure?
Yes.
Oh, that I looked at that closely because I knew people would ask about that, thinking that it was a bad throw. He could not wait till there was any definition of Sanders on that play.
Yep.
So that was not an overthrow where you say, "Wow, he should have made a great throw." He could not wait, and at that moment when he had to release the football, there was no definition of where Sanders was going to be.
Yeah, and that's to me like I look at those two plays with Miles Sanders and say, that's the extra element, the extra layer that he kind of brings that the Eagles really haven't had.
Right.
Darren Sproles. Sproles has been used in the short and intermediate areas, but to have a guy that can attack vertically down the field and be that kind of a weapon, on the deep sail route or down the seam like that, I think that adds a different layer that, a Jordan Howard and a Darren Sproles or Corey Clement don't necessarily have in this offense.
Yeah, and a couple of things. I think when we know they're 1-2, and we can go over specific plays in any game, good and bad. But I think, to me, as you look ahead, which, ultimately we're going to do, and when I say look ahead, we'll get to Green Bay in a second. I'm just talking about as we look at this season, big picture. I think there's a couple of things on offense that have to get cleaned up.
Yeah.
Number one, this team's going to have to run the ball better overall. Now, Sanders had one longer run, which gave him decent numbers when you look at the overall statistics, his running game statistics. But for the most part, the last 2 weeks, they've struggled to run the ball with any kind of real efficiency and consistency. I think that has to change.
Okay.
I didn't think the offensive line in this game was bad by any means. Once I watched the tape,
it was certainly better than last week.
It was better than the week before. Can it still be better? Yes. And we know that Peters went out, then Dillard went out. Now Peters came back.
Yep.
But I think that overall there can be a little more consistency in that regard. One of the things that's always struck me over the last couple of years, and I don't know the reason for this, and I don't know if you know the reason, but when they do call shot plays, which normally have maximum protection concepts, they just don't seem to protect those well. And I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that either.
But it just, particularly when you don't have a Deshaun Jackson out there who can simply run by people, you're looking to call a shot play because that's more of a tactical play than it is just an individual play.
Right.
And for some reason, over the last number of years, they just don't seem to protect that well, and I don't know why.
Well, let me ask you this, because one thing that we saw in this game was a lot of empty sets from the Eagles' offense. From a tactical standpoint, what do you think was the thought process there in going into this game against this defense, or maybe with this personnel? I guess it's a two-part question.
Right.
Do you think it was more one or the other, why they went with so much empty in this game?
Well, I think empty theoretically allows the quarterback to get rid of the ball quicker.
Yep.
Because normally with empty, it's quick game throws, shorter routes, because
You only have five
you
to
only
protect.
have 5 to protect.
And things are more well defined because coverage, they have to tip their hand typically a little
correct. And secondly, because they don't really have a true deep threat, it plays more to the receivers they're putting out there.
bit. Okay.
Shorter throws, bigger bodies. Certainly with Hollins and Arcega-Whiteside, bigger bodies. Hopefully you get some run after catch, because for all of Aguilar's issues, which you can't pretend they didn't happen catching the ball, he still is very good run after catch. So you're hoping that he can do that as he did on his longer touchdown.
Sure.
So I think that's why you do it. But the problem with that is if you can't run the ball, you get caught in drives where you have to go 12, 13 plays to score.
Right.
And it's very difficult to do that with consistency in this league. And then if you have a penalty or you miss a throw and all of a sudden it's 2nd and 10 or 3rd and 9, it just becomes a lot more difficult.
The uphill battle is more uphill in those scenarios.
Correct.
When the other big thing we saw from those empty sets was the placement of the receivers, because a number of times, and you've talked about this a lot with other teams, we haven't necessarily seen it much from the Eagles over the years, is that you had Miles Sanders or Darren Sproles, whoever the running back was, to the short side of the field with
Number
the tight
one to
end,
the
Zach
boundary.
Ertz. Yeah.
Correct.
So
Number
when you
one to
have
the
that
boundary.
kind of a set, when you align that
Right.
way, what does that do for an offense?
Well, it helps to find the coverage, because if you're going to put the back and the tight end to the Twins' side and have 3 wide receivers to trips, the defense pretty much has to tell you how they choose to play that, because they're not going to match up linebackers on wide receivers, man-to-man.
Yep.
Now, there's a lot of combination coverages in this league right now, because coverages have clearly expanded. Teams will play man on one side, zone on another. They'll play hybrid looks. But for the most part, it does give you a pre-snap means to research the defense and learn something. And I think that's one reason why you do that.
Yeah, we saw the big play on the opening drive, 2 Miles Sanders down the field. It was a little bit of a busted coverage on Detroit's end. But
Right, that's because Wentz, it was a second reaction play.
Yep.
And I forget who the corner was.
I think it was Slay.
It might have been
over that
Slay.
side, yeah.
So it was a zone concept, and
Yep.
I'm sure Slay, because in zone your eyes tend to be looking back in.
Yep.
He probably saw movement and figured, okay, something's going to happen where I'm going to be involved, because Carson started to move towards Slay's side.
Well, this is going to be a big test this Thursday night for this Eagles offense going up against Green Bay. We'll touch on the Packers here in a sec. Let's talk about the Eagles defense and just what we've seen from them, not just this week, but over the course of 3 games. Obviously, the big topic that everybody is talking about is the pass rush, and a game where they did not register a sack. 2 sacks on the year.
Right.
1 came off a stunt with Tim Jernigan. 1 came off an all-out blitz, or not an all-out blitz, but a big blitz from Andrew Sendejo last week. So you've got
none of the
sacks.
big names have had sacks.
Yep.
And I think that Jim Schwartz is telling you that the pass rush is a problem, because he's going to 0 blitz.
Yeah.
And they obviously got burned with it in the loss to Atlanta, although it was
On the final
successful
play,
at times.
Yep, sure.
They got burned with it again this week on a 3rd and long, I believe, when Stafford hit Marvin Jones on a crosser for 25-plus yards.
Yep.
So that was going to be my defensive sort of macro issue. This is a team that's theoretically built on a 4-man pass rush.
Yeah.
And the thing is, with the corner situation being what it is, the 4-man pass rush is more important than ever. And I think, look, you and I have watched a lot of football. I think you can see Sidney Jones, when he's playing on the outside, is not playing with a high level of confidence right now. And hopefully he can get to that point, because he's talented enough to be that guy. But I think right now he's struggling a little bit. I mean, so that's a little bit of a concern. I don't know what Darby's status will be with a short week for Thursday night.
Yep.
Was it a hamstring?
I'm not positive.
If it
on that,
was, he's not likely to go on Thursday night.
on a short week, yeah.
On a short week. So, the issue they face is the corner position has been a little inconsistent. And then when you add in the fact that they can't get a 4-man pass rush with any consistency, it presents something that has to be overcome.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can overcome it, and sometimes you can't.
Yeah, last week, going up against Atlanta, I charted all the throws from Matt Ryan and said, all right, what did Atlanta do to kind of negate the pass rush? Because they did do a lot of things. And, Matt Ryan was 7 of 7 on screen passes. He was 3 for 3, and more actually a little bit better than that off play action. They did a lot of different things to try and negate the Eagles pass rush. And even this week, I thought Detroit did some things to trying to get, you saw a lot of the chipping both edges. We saw some things. But at the end of the day, the Eagles have seen a lot of that in the past. They've seen
those are tactics that have been in the league a long time.
Exactly. This isn't anything new.
This is not a new tactic.
You want to be. They need to be able to get home. And sacks are, to me, you look at sacks and it's not a tell-all about how a defensive line is
but
playing.
They're not really hitting the quarterback.
They're big. That's the thing is that they create big plays that you want to be able to get. They're drive killers.
And you can also beat pressure with route concepts, because I remember a completion. I'm almost certain it was in the fourth quarter at a critical point. I probably have it in my notes.
This is the 3rd and long.
Where Amendola caught it on the sideline.
Yep, it was a great route.
Great.
Concept.
It was Tripp's bunch, and they did a great job with Amendola being number 3 and then working outside where Douglas had to work through some traffic. And that was one of the few times where they actually did get pressure, because Graham beat the right tackle, Ricky Wagner, and he got pressure. He hit Stafford as soon as he threw it, but the route was defined immediately that Stafford could make the throw and complete it for a first down. I think it was 15 yards on 3rd and 9 or 11.
Something like that, yeah.
It was 3rd and long.
It was a killer.
It was a killer play.
Yeah.
So, look, when things go wrong like this, it seems like they snowball. And who knows what will happen Thursday night, but the bottom line is, as you said, they have to find a way with 4 down linemen to get in and around the quarterback and impact his ability to be comfortable in the pocket.
Yeah, and that's what's tricky about it is this, and I'm not going to have time to be able to write 2 recaps of this game because of the short week, but I think when you look at the defense, and I chose to write about the offense this week, but when you look at the defense, and you look at it, and it's all right. Well, you look at the whole in terms of all the numbers and what they haven't been giving up a ton of points. The turnovers haven't been huge, and the sacks haven't been huge, but they've found ways to get stops, and they've been able to get off the field at a relatively good rate. The 3rd down defense isn't bad. They're a little bit better than middle of the road.
Right.
They've found ways to be able to get stops.
But they haven't been able to shift field position.
That's
and the problem is when you don't have now a big play threat, and we don't know when Deshaun will be back, and when you're not running the ball with consistency, it's too hard to score that way in this league with consistency.
Yeah.
But the problem is, there's just so many fluky things that happen. Aguilar dropping the touchdown the week prior. Who knows what would have happened this week if Goddard catches that ball 2.5 minutes before they end up scoring, because the whole complexion of the game changes then for the final half of the fourth quarter.
Yep.
So you just don't know. And again, it's not an excuse thing. And coaches don't speak in excuses, as you know. But, the teams that win a lot, sometimes it's just little things in games that you win, and maybe you don't play great, but something happens, 1 play, 2 plays, and you win the game.
Yep.
Those 1 or 2 plays are not happening right now for the Eagles, and they need those plays because they're missing so many of their important pieces.
Yeah, it's it's something that you can turn and say, well, if these 2 plays would go differently, the Eagles are 3-0, they're 2-1,
but they're 1-2.
But they're 1-2, exactly.
And
that's
Bill
kind of where we're
Parcells
at.
always said, "You are what your record says you are."
This week has a different feel. If they're not, but it's not.
It's not.
They're
Exactly.
1-2. So now you go into Green Bay, and let's talk about the Packers, because a team that's 3-0.
That's actually defined by their defense, not by their offense.
Without question, like that
their
defense
is
so impressive.
A little, and I hate to use this word, and I hope I don't get ripped on Twitter, but their offense is a little painful to watch.
I mean, you'll get ripped on Twitter no matter what.
Right.
Well, so
you're not going to agree with me because you don't want to get ripped on.
No, well, I mean, I try not to. But let's talk about their defense, because their defense is extremely impressive on film. The play personality of this defense, I can't think of a unit in the NFL that has shifted so much. We'll say in 24 months, to the last 2 years. Mike Pettin's he's done a great job. He's done a great job of retooling that defense.
Yeah, and it's a very good mix of scheme and talent, because they have really good players at all 3 levels of the defense. And then when you mix in some really good schemes, some really good pressure concepts, a lot of multiple front looks, they do a lot of different things. They use a lot of different safeties in different spots, so it's difficult to really get a feel for what they're doing by how their safeties are aligned. So, and then, they lost a kid who was a small school kid from James Madison, Raven Green, who I thought played really well for the first game and a half, and then he goes out and they bring in Will Redmond, and he's jumping all over the screen, making plays. So, obviously they're coaching that secondary. I don't know who the secondary coach is, and I probably should, but I
Off the top of
don't.
my head, I don't. Yeah.
But their secondary is playing really well. And then I love what they do when they go to their dime front, bringing Zadarius Smith inside. He is a load for offensive guards.
Yep.
He's really a good pass rusher inside. And Preston Smith is long and athletic on the outside. Then when they play their three down front, whether it's in base, which they've played a lot of the last 2 weeks, or even in nickel when they play that 5 across front.
Yep.
I'm telling you, Dean Lowry, Lancaster, Kenny Clark, those guys have been really, really good through 3 games.
Kenny Clark has looked really, really good.
So has this Lancaster kid.
Yeah.
Northwestern.
Him and
You know,
Lowry, both Northwestern
Yeah,
guys.
I mean, unbelievable. 2 starters from Northwestern.
Who'd have thought it?
Wow.
All right, well, let's talk about a guy that, to me, and I'm going to talk about him later in the show, as I teased earlier,
Savage?
Jair Alexander.
Oh.
I mean, Greg, you watch the whole league. I watch it in bits
Good player.
and pieces.
Should have got. Was
He's
for a touchdown this week with that Flacco underthrew.
Yeah, to me, like, he's been one of the most impressive players I feel like I've watched.
Well, and he
all,
fits
all,
just
all
what you
fall.
said about the play personality.
He does.
You know, he's got the corner mentality.
He's got exactly what you want from him.
He's got exactly what you want from a corner.
Yeah,
and they usually, they don't always match up. It depends on the opponent. 2 weeks ago against Minnesota, they did not match their corners. This week they did. I think it's because of who they were playing against. Because obviously Sanders is a smaller, quicker, faster receiver, and Cameron Sutton is a bigger receiver, so it made sense for King to be on him and for Alexander to be on Sanders. But Alexander's a really good player.
And when you look at the way that they utilize all those defensive backs, and you talk about the rotation, whether it's Tremont Williams and Kevin King, and you've got Savage and you've got Adrian Amos, those are the core guys. But the way that they rotate those guys, we talked about the versatility of Detroit's defense last week. We kind of always knew where the guys in the secondary tended to be. They're moving these guys inside, outside, in the box, up high. The safeties I couldn't really ping on where exactly they like to line up. They changed the matchups and man coverage a lot in terms of who's going to match on the tight end. It's a tough group.
It's a tough group. And normally we think of multiplicity with a defense in terms of their fronts.
Yeah.
They're one of those defenses, and Mike Pettine's always been that way, where the multiplicity, they're still multiple with their fronts, but there's tremendous multiplicity with not so much the coverage per se, but how they use people within their coverages.
Right, sure.
And that's something that's difficult to figure out.
I'm going to be honest, too. Going into today, I hadn't charted anything with their defense yet. I'd watched every game to this point and said, it's a heavy man defense. Maybe we'll talk about all the man beaters and things like that. And then I go and I chart it, and I'm like, man, it's more zone. Like it's just like the way that they play is.
One play really stood out to me, and I made a note of it. And I think I'm going to try to remember without looking at my notes, and you'll remember it. I believe it was early in the fourth quarter, and it was 3rd and 5.
Okay.
And they showed a 7-man front.
Yes.
You know the play I'm talking about?
I know. Yep, go ahead.
They showed a 7-man front, and when you see a 7-man front, which included the double mug look, you know they're not bringing 7, but you don't know how many of the 7 and which of the 7 might be involved in the rush.
By the way, I don't want to cut that off. With what they showed in Week 1 against Chicago, you have to be on high alert whenever they come into this look, because they abused Chicago out of this look.
Without question.
Okay, so go ahead. Yes.
And then, so what happens is Flacco, and he's been in the league a long time. People can say what they want about Joe Flacco. He's been in the league a long time. He's seen a lot of things. So he's seeing this, and he's thinking that there's going to be some kind of blitz pressure.
Yeah.
So what happens is, and I think it was Freeman who was offset to Flacco's left, and he thinks, okay, they're going to blitz, and I see man coverage now, it's kind of man coverage across the board, and certainly out to my left, the defense is right, where it's King, who's the corner, and, all of a sudden the ball gets snapped, and Freeman releases out into the flat, and Flacco thinks there's no one there. Well, they drop everybody except 4. They rush 4, and they get to cover 2, which means that King is sitting in the flat. Okay? So King tackles Freeman for a 2-yard gain on 3rd and 5, and they punt.
Yeah, which could have been worse. It could have been a turnover.
Right.
Yeah.
But the point is, they punt.
Yep, exactly.
And a game, I think that was 24-16 at the time, and so it was a 1-score game. So it's that kind of stuff. Everybody just thinks, oh, it's pressure, it's challenging. Oh, it is challenging mentally, but that doesn't mean it's man and blitz on every snap.
Right.
They do a lot of things that cause some mental gymnastics for an offense, both for the quarterback, the pass protection, backs now getting involved in the protection. They're very good at that.
So for the Eagles to be able to prepare for this on a short week,
it's hard.
It's a tall task. And so that's why, from an offensive standpoint, and you would say this for a defensive standpoint too, going into this game, it's going to be about, hey, look, we have to do what we do. We have to get back to basics. You on a short week, you always want to do that, but against a defense like this, you especially
probably
want to
some degree pare down the game plan.
You have to,
because you cannot make mistakes against a defense that is this aggressive, both in terms of style of play, play personality, as you said, great term, and also in their tactical approach.
Yeah.
Because you're better off punting. You can't make mistakes. You can't have Wentz get sacked because a blitz is not picked up and all of a sudden you're punting out of your own end zone. You can't do those kinds of things.
They're second in the league right now in opposing quarterback rating. Opposing quarterback 63.1 rating.
Yeah.
Completion percentage 56.6%. That's third in the league. They're third in sacks at 12. They're third in touchdown efficiency defensively. Third in scoring efficiency. They're first with 8 takeaways on defense in the NFL right now. Inside the 30, they are outstanding. They lock teams down when they get inside the 30-yard line.
They looked
it matches
the way those
up
numbers.
on film.
Yes,
no question. Let me ask, what is the soft spot in this defense in your mind? If you're going in and you say, all right, this is a matchup that I want, or this is an area where you would want to try and attack, put your coaching hat on here. You have got a couple days to prepare. What's your thought process going into this game?
See, I don't think they have a weakness that's a clear, defined this is somewhere we can attack and we know we can win.
Yep.
I think there's going to have to be some individual plays made by receivers. I think you're going to have to, and again, because of the short week, maybe you can't do a lot of this stuff, but it should be ingrained, through training camp and even prior. I think you want to maybe do some motion and things that make them have to react to you. But again, now you're getting to the short week part of this, and you just have to be a little careful about that. But I don't think they have a defined weakness. Look, we talked about their front. I mentioned Zadarius Smith. Preston Smith is a very good pass rusher as well. I think Blake Martinez is he's one of those guys, and I was a little wrong about him coming out of Stanford, but that guy makes a lot of tackles now.
He's always around the ball.
He doesn't look like he's a dynamic player,
right?
But he's a really good player.
Well, that's the guy that I would say, like, all right, if you find a way, and they've managed a way to do this,
right?
To get him matched up, then you feel good about
the
that.
only thing I'd say. And I'm not sure that the Eagles at this point have shown the capability of doing this, and much of this will depend on Dallas Goedert.
I was just going to say that I feel like his return would be pivotal as a full-time player.
Because I think one of the things you try to do with that defense is get them to play in their base with B.J. Goodson as the other stack backer in a base 3-4 front.
Just take a defensive back off the field.
As Minnesota did and ran the ball well. We saw Denver. Denver actually ran the ball with efficiency. They just hit no big plays with the exception of one to Sutton, I think, in the third quarter. And Denver didn't even try to hit any big plays. But, I think that if you can get them in their base and have some success running and or passing, you calm down a lot of the multiplicity of their defense. Because most teams are more multiple in their sub than their base. Now, it doesn't mean you'll never see a blitz out of base or you'll never see a different front look, but most teams, including the Packers, are less multiple out of base, so you try to calm them down.
And I feel like that's what Chicago tried to do with them in week 1. They played so much 21 personnel, 20 personnel. I'm assuming with the idea, maybe they'll go with a little bit of a heavier package.
Which they didn't
week 1.
They did not.
They didn't at all.
And again, you don't know. Pettin is very unpredictable.
Yeah.
I mean, the Eagles could come out in 12 personnel if Goddard's healthy, and he could be in dime.
Right.
You just don't know.
That's what they've done.
Right.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how they decide to match this up.
It's an intriguing game for me, just as someone who loves the X's and O's. And I have to be honest, a tough matchup for the Eagles offense.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how that goes on that side. Let's go to the other side now and talk about Green Bay's offense. When you talk about Green Bay, and obviously it almost always is this way, you start with the quarterback, you start with Aaron Rodgers. To me, with this new scheme, with the way that they want to play and the way that this player is playing, I think it starts with Aaron Jones in the run game.
Well, Jones had a good game 2 weeks ago. This week, Jamal Williams had more carries and more yards. I think their pass game has been very uneven at best.
Yep.
They've hit a couple of plays. This week they scored the touchdown on the opening drive when Rodgers, who's so good at drawing off sides, then threw this to Valdez-Scantling. But for the most part, this pass game really has not been very good through 3 games.
Third down, they've been awful.
Right.
They're converting 25% right now in third down, 29th in the league. They're 2 for 20 right now in third and long. That's 6+ yards. 30th in the league right now. They're struggling.
So they're 2
to
for 20 on
consistently
3rd and 6+?
Yes. It's pretty bad.
I don't need a calculator to know that's not very good.
That's not good.
No,
but there are 2 teams worse, so I guess that's good.
What are the? Do you know what?
I don't know.
Oh.
Don't know who the.
I just be
I
curious.
can guess.
I'm going to look that up in the office tomorrow.
I can guess there's a team in Florida that might have a worse one.
Maybe. But yeah, their pass game looks very much out of sync with very few exceptions. Even things like RPOs look out of sync. The timing of Rodgers with the receiver and on, let's say, quick slants looks very much out of sync. Just kind of basic things are not being executed in the pass game.
Really, right now, they're banking on trying to be efficient. They want to be able to run the ball. They're running the ball actually at a pretty high clip. They are, right? Because they're not turning the ball over.
Right.
They're controlling the field position battle on offense, and they're doing just enough to say the defense is going to keep us in this game.
I think back to the opening play against Minnesota, which was one of their few actual...
That drive to open the game was...
Yeah.
you thought, okay, now they're back.
Right, which was one of their, only really defined plays that looked like, hey, this is the way it's supposed to be executed. And the play I'm speaking about, when Davante Adams looked like he was going to run the in-breaker, which they run so much of, and then he broke it back to the outside.
Yep.
And, that was beautiful design, and it was well executed, but there haven't been many of those plays.
Yeah, so let's get, for a quick background, Matt LaFleur, the new head coach, comes from the Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, so that scheme, that coaching tree. So, stretch zone, outside zone, run the football, play action off of that. Some creative plays in there. We saw the fullback lead for a touchdown on the throwback. We saw that this week, nearly for a touchdown, stopped just short. But you're going to have those plays that we typically see from Kyle Shanahan and Mike Shanahan going back into the 90s and 2000s. You're going to see that in this playbook. They just haven't been able to get.
It's a fascinating marriage because, look, Aaron Rodgers is extremely talented throwing a football. That's not the issue at all. But Aaron Rodgers, over the last number of years, has probably been at his best more with second reaction type plays or when there's been a specific shot play type design, that he's able to make a throw. But over the course of 4 quarters, as good as Rodgers is, he's not really been a structured 4-quarter player. And that offense is really built on that.
That's why a Nick Mullins or a C.J. Beathard can step in and on short week and function and be productive.
Yes, and productive is a relative term.
Right.
But yes, Nick Mullins was extremely productive in 8, 9, 10 starts last year.
Yep. Yeah, it's no
No,
question.
you're exactly right.
Yeah.
And Rodgers, over the last 4 or 5 years of his career, has really not been that kind of player, that style of player. So I would expect this would take some time.
So this pass game offense, has, like you said, has been a little bit slow starting.
Yes.
Davante Adams is a very good player.
Really good
very
player.
crafty
They move
player.
him all around, too.
Yes, they inside, outside, route running, releases off the line.
Yes.
Very, very good. I asked you back in the summer when we had our fantasy football podcast, who was the other guy that would stand out in your mind in this offense? And so I'll just roll off the names, and you tell me if there's any. I know it's been tough because of the.
Do you remember who I said?
I think I remember who you said, but
because I have no idea who I said.
Yeah, I think I remember who it was. But Geronimo Allison, Marquez Valdez-Scantling. We'll throw in Jimmy Graham in there as well. You got Kumaro. You've got some of these other guys. Thoughts on who is like that next? Who's that other threat in the passing game for them?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a team that's struggling to move the football right now.
Yeah. I don't think right now there's a really good... Look, the one thing you don't want to have happen, okay, is the big play with Valdez-Scantling.
Yes.
Because he can run.
He can run. He's a big
and
kid
we
who
saw
can run.
week 1 against Chicago when Rodgers hit him for a big play. We saw this past week when Rodgers hit him for the touchdown to end the first drive when the Broncos were offside and Rodgers went over the top. So you do have to be aware of that. I think that Valdez-Scantling has had a similar number of targets as Davante Adams through 3 games.
I haven't looked
not
at the target
mistaken.
list. I'm going to blame Ben on this because we usually do targets on our stat sheet.
I could be wrong, but I think that's true. So he does throw the ball to Valdez-Scantling.
Yep. Yeah, he does. And he's a guy that we thought was very intriguing coming out of South Florida a couple years ago.
And Geronimo Allison is an odd guy.
You liked him more than I did coming out.
Coming out of Illinois.
Yeah.
I kind of liked him. He's kind of become what I thought he could become.
Yep.
And there are times that he is a factor, and then there's other times he's not.
Right.
But I think that's a function of their offense being very inconsistent in the passing game right now.
Yeah, and if we talk about from the offensive line standpoint, Aaron Rodgers is guilty as anybody of holding onto the football. And that offensive line hasn't always been stout. They've got a right guard in Billy Turner, who frankly has struggled
through three games without question.
Elton Jenkins is a rookie that they've kind of been rotating in and out, but it's been mostly Billy Turner.
I think this is a game where Fletcher Cox, and I'm not going to use the ridiculous term he's got to step up, but I think there's clear mismatch here. And I think Fletcher Cox has to exploit that mismatch.
Yeah, somebody's got to exploit that. You got to find a way to get isolated on Billy Turner. Yeah. The run game, real quick. You mentioned the Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams duo. Give us quick elevator speeches on those two guys, how they compare and contrast.
Well, I really like Jones coming out of UTEP. In fact, I thought that stylistically he kind of reminded me of Frank Gore light, just stylistically.
Okay.
And I thought 2 weeks ago when he had 116 yards against the Vikings, you saw a lot of that. You saw the ability to get through small creases at the point of attack, which I think he's very good at. I think he's got pretty quick feet. I think he's got good patience, good vision. Jamal Williams, to me, is a little more of a true zone runner.
Yep.
Put his foot in the ground and go.
Yep.
I don't think he's quite as loose-hipped as Aaron Jones, but he's a big back, and he doesn't have juice in terms of, a 4-4 guy, but I think if he can stick his foot in the ground and get through that initial point of attack, he's got a little more juice than people might think.
Yeah,
I happen to like Jones's overall skill set more, but I think Williams still presents some issues if you can block it.
Yeah, I actually didn't watch Jones coming out of UTEP. He was like one of my favorite. I don't know what I'm doing back there half the time. I don't know. The guys fall through the cracks.
We'll just have to go have another cookie after this.
All right. I'll figure it out. All right. Well, looking forward to next week, Greg. We won't be able to talk about the day after as we usually do, but a few days after this game, we'll get together. We'll both watch the film, obviously, and we'll preview the Eagles' next matchup next Monday here at the NovaCare Complex. Thanks for joining us here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade.
All right, Fran. Thanks.
Well, great stuff there from Greg, and you can follow him on Twitter just like I do, at Greg Cosell. And while you're at it, I'm at FDuffy3. That's where I post all the podcasts I'm a part of, including the Journey to the Draft podcast, which you should be subscribed to by now, and all of our X's and O's content that you can catch on PhiladelphiaEagles.com and the Eagles mobile app. We just posted the All-22 review, driven by AAA. We posted that Monday afternoon. So if you're listening to this on Tuesday, you want to get some video breakdowns of what Greg and I just discussed, go check that out. I broke down the film live during the game on Sunday. We posted all those play breakdowns the next morning. So go check that out over on PhiladelphiaEagles.com. All right, quick order of business. Best way to support the show is to go on to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, wherever you listen, wherever that home base is. Leave us a rating and give us a comment. Really wanted to give my appreciation to some of you guys out there who did exactly that. Nikki Slice left a 5-star review, said how much he loves the show, and it's a must listen each and every week. Nikki, really appreciate that. Jay Mason 494 again left a 5-star review and commented saying how much they learn from the show every week. And then Kevin DeFranco also left a 5-star review saying how much he enjoys the show. So great stuff from Kevin, from Jay Mason, Nikki Slice. Thank you to all of you and all of you out there for listening, whether it's on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Google Play, and of course, PhiladelphiaEagles.com and the Eagles mobile app. All right, let's transition now to my scouting report on Jair Alexander, who, as we talked about earlier with Greg, he's just been lights out so far. One of the best corners in the NFL, just his second season. Let's get into it now in Scouting Report.
Dim those lights. We're headed to the film room for the Scouting Report.
All right, so Jair Alexander coming out of Louisville in the 2018 NFL Draft. I'm just going to literally read from my notes, almost verbatim here. I cut it down a little bit for you guys, but you get the sense of how I felt about this kid. He was a 2-year starter for Todd Grantham at Louisville. Plenty of experience at both outside corner spots. He also lined up in the slot in their nickel package, so showed the ability to play inside and outside. Missed most of his final season with an injury. I believe he only had 2 or 3 starts that year, only played in 6 games, but he was second-team All-ACC as a true sophomore. The year before was a very productive player on the ball, despite only starting 20 games as a collegian. Also loved, like I said, that inside-outside proven versatility. This wasn't a guy that lined up outside and you said, he's probably more of a nickel guy. He had the ability to shadow receivers inside and out. Now, on the shorter side, a little bit over 5'10", just under 200 pounds, though. So this guy had a pretty well-built frame, boasts all the athletic traits that you needed to start in the outside of the NFL. Fluid, oily hips, the ability to stay hip-to-hip with receivers at all depths of the field, very smooth in and out of breaks, whether he was just planning and driving from off coverage or if he was hip-to-hip with a receiver and he threw a break at the top of the route, he was able to snap off breaks just like that. His reaction quickness at the top of routes was very, very impressive. Had great feet, really smooth when he was asked to mirror. He looked really good as a press corner in his junior season. He was just really competitive, really physical at the line of scrimmage early in the down, really got into the face of opposing receivers. And one of my comments, he played angry in coverage. And honestly, he plays angry in coverage now. He is one of the most physical, feisty players that you're going to see in the NFL, pound for pound. One of the toughest skill players on defense that you will see in this league right now. More than enough speed to carry vertical receivers. That was a question some had watching him. Then he goes to the combine. He runs 4.38 laser time, so it wasn't even, although it wasn't a fast watch. It was a 4.38 laser, tested great across the board in all the athletic testing. So athletically, there were never any questions about him at that point in the process. Good awareness and zone coverage, wasn't just a man-to-man guy, felt routes developing around him, really had a knack for jumping routes and making plays on the football. I thought he had good ball skills, the ability not just to play out of phase and get a ball on the ground, shooting his hands through the catch point, but also turn, find the ball late, go up and attack it in the air. He had the ability to play the ball. I was really impressed with that trait from his game. And, wasn't an intimidating run defender because of his size, but I thought he was serviceable in college. I thought he had the ability to come down and make a tackle in the flat, and he was used as a blitzer at times, was effective in that role from the short side of the field. From a negative standpoint, I brought up the size. I didn't think that he had the size and the strength necessarily, that you would want to see for a top prospect. He gave up 6 jump balls, I believe, for a touchdown. It was 4 jump balls in the red zone in 2016, so his sophomore year. So you had some questions. All right, is he going to get out-muscled at the catch point at the next level? Is he going to have the ability to hang with bigger receivers on the outside? So far, through one full season and 3 games, that has not been the case. This guy is able to play the ball, go up and attack it in the air. His physicality, his competitiveness, his urgency, all of that shines through on film. Played a little bit grabby at times, especially in the first 10 to 12 yards. I wondered if he was going to be able to get away with that in the next level. Again, kind of speaking to that urgency and that violence and that attitude that he played with all the time in coverage from snap to whistle. And then also was a little bit slow to trigger downhill at times as a tackler. So, that competitiveness that I saw, I didn't quite see that all the time at Louisville coming downhill to make a play in the flat. But, overall, this was my final write-up. He can play any corner spot in any scheme. He's got the skill set of a quality starter in the NFL with the versatility to play both inside and out. On the field, his traits are great. I think he's going to turn into a really good player with a chance to be a great player. His floor is as a good nickel. His ceiling is as a top 5 corner in the NFL. And I got news for you guys. We talked about it with Greg earlier. I think he's going to end up, he could be an all-pro. Maybe not this year. We'll see if he continues down this path. It could be this year. But very soon, this guy is going to be known as one of the top cover corners in the NFL. He has been very, very impressive so far, and a huge test for this Eagles receiving core going into Thursday night. All right, that'll do it. Another show in the books here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. For everybody here at the NovaCare Complex, I'm Fran Duffy. We will talk to you next week.